Whitley Strieber is the best-selling author of The Wolfen and The Hunger, both of which were made into successful films. His later books, the New York Times bestsellers Communion, True Story, Transformation, The Breakthrough, and Breakthrough. The Next Step details his personal encounters with his extraterrestrial intelligence-type friends. He's gonna talk a lot about the early years tonight because of something he's found. He also examined the famous Roswell incident in his science fiction novel Majestic. Now, he co-authored one of my favorite books of all time. It's not even mentioned here, called War Day. I don't know if you've never read War Day. That's one you're going to want to put on your list. God, that was such a well-done book. Whitley and I have been through much together. In a moment, once again, Whitley Strieber right here. You know, I thought about it, and there really is. Whitley, we have been through so much together, so many years, the good times, the really bad times. There have been some of those, some you don't know about. Hail Bop. Oh, gosh, we've been through a lot together.
We sure have.
When you actually think back over the years, Whit, it's been a lot, hasn't it?
It's amazing. We have been doing this together for a while.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
For a while.
What an adventure. What
an adventure. And the first hour I kind of laid it out. We're in a really wild, adventuresome time right now. Maybe in a slightly worrisome way, but man.
I was just thinking of there's a very interesting take on the solar situation that really comes so far out of left field that people are going to be very surprised to hear me talking about it.
You mean for even further out than the guy who was in charge of all this?
In a way, but not in a good way, though.
Okay.
Because I think people, I don't know, talking about, I don't know, when there's no evidence of something like that. Of course, I mean, this one thing about if the sun were ever to nova, we wouldn't have to worry about it.
No.
Anyway, you remember Betty, Andreas, and Luca?
Yes, I do.
Of course.
Yes.
She had a series of close encounters back in the 70s, and she was studied for many years by a fine UFO investigator, Raymond Fowler.
Uh-huh. Oh, yes, I know Raymond.
Well, one of the, I know, back in the mid-'80s, gentleman who was reading one of the books noticed that the star language that Betty was speaking was ancient Gaelic, and he translated the Gaelic words. It was very interesting, and I talked about this in one of my books. And now there's a lot of star language in Betty's stuff. Another man realized that Paul Potter is his name, and his website is ufophysics.com, realized that a lot of the other stuff was in ancient Latin, which Betty doesn't know Gaelic or Latin.
Yeah, I was about to ask, how in the world would she be doing either one?
Totally no idea. Okay, now, here's the thing. These statements, made mostly under hypnosis by Betty, back in the late 70s, are mostly about the sun.
Oh, really?
Oh, really? About the sun, and the sun being a problem, and the sun getting restless.
Well, it's doing all that.
It is doing all that.
I'm here to tell you, Whitley, I've been a ham operator all my life. I've watched the sun up cycles, down cycles, up cycles. I've been with it all the way. I study it. And there's never, Whitley, not in our history keeping of what the sun has done, has it done what it's doing now. No way. Whitley, we're at solar maximum now. We're at numbers, indexes at 330. I saw the A count at 180 yesterday. Now, these kind of numbers are beyond even what you might get during a solar max, and we're getting it now years down line. I'm telling you, it's nuts.
Years down line, and the monthly graph of solar activity is going to take a huge jump up in October, completely out of the scale. It isn't something that's understood either, really.
Maybe this is the October surprise.
So, there could be a reason for it, and it's an interesting one. The sun's magnetic field, when it's supposed to flip every 11 years, and indeed in February of 2001, it began the process of flipping.
Yeah.
And it, however, did not flip completely.
When he says flip, he means it changes polarization.
Polarity.
Right,
yeah,
polarity.
Changes polarization.
That's right. That's a normal process.
Absolutely, except what's not normal is it didn't finish. It's not on the same plane as it normally is. It's about halfway there. So the sun's magnetic field is not in a normal state. And in addition, in last August, some scientists announced that cosmic dust was beginning to enter our solar system because the sun's magnetic field is not keeping it out any longer. Now, this is very important. There's a sort of a maverick scientist called Paul Laviolette. He may have been on your show. I don't know. You might know him.
Yes.
Yeah, well, Paul is a very smart guy, and he's one of these scientists who has made predictions that the astronomical community has ignored, and then they've come true, and gradually his theories are being adopted. And he says that cosmic dust has a tremendously powerful effect on the sun.
Well, you got to listen to these guys, Whitley, because the regular scientists are too scared and have too much invested in their careers to make bold statements. They just don't do it.
They end up sounding like Pollyannas because they're afraid to draw attention to themselves.
That's right.
And make forthright statements. I interviewed Paul last week, which is, it's still up on my site if anyone wants to listen to it.
Yeah, I forgot to add, by the way, Whitley continues Dreamland. Remember Dreamland, folks? Some of you, well, it's still there. It's streaming every week on the internet through Whitley's site, unknowncountry.com.
Right. You click on Listen Now on the upper right-hand side of the site.
And you'd get Dreamland.
I never would stop Dreamland. Dreamland was a wonderful, fun program, and it still is.
Dreamland should continue, and I'm glad it is, Whitley, and I'm glad you're doing it, man.
I'm glad that the founder thinks it should continue because I agree completely.
So anyway, you interviewed him, and he said what?
Yeah, well, he said basically that, he wasn't too surprised about what was happening to the sun right now because cosmic dust is entering the solar system, and he says that this process will continue and will intensify. And what's interesting is that Paul believes that the strange, complicated warning that we have received from the ancient world in the form of myths and symbols and stories of distant past catastrophes like the flood, et cetera, and so forth, all have to do with the fact that the galactic core is exploding, and we don't know it because it's coming in pulses, and we can't see the pulse until it's here. In other words, it's something that you can't see light before it arrives at your eye.
That's right.
And he says that their warning from the past is that these pulses arrive every 10,000 years or so on a very exact cycle. And that the Mayan calendar that points toward 2012 points toward the moment of the arrival of the next pulse, and that it will be preceded by a wave of cosmic dust that is kind of being pushed ahead of the pulse, and indeed this dust is entering the solar system now. Right or wrong, we'll know certainly by 2012, and if this happens, then we're going to see the sun get into a very intensely active state continuously. Now, there will be no solar minimum. The activity level will just keep going up in pulses and in phases over the next 10 or 15 years. Paul is right.
Whitley, I've observed that when comets come close to the sun, they cause a disturbance on the sun. When they occasionally collide with the sun, they cause a really big disturbance on the sun.
We actually saw the SOHO satellite.
We sure did.
photographed it, much to the surprise of the scientific community, which said, "Oh my, how strange!
Yeah.
This is against our theories," and it just disappeared.
Yeah, I know.
They just dropped it.
I didn't forget. And when you brought up the cosmic dust thing, it reminded me of that. In other words, if one could precipitate the sun into real action, then so could the other.
Yeah.
I've got a picture up if you get a chance. I don't know if you've seen it. I just put, just per chance, I went and got a picture of today's sun, the way it looks today. When basically what we should see is a nice, quiet disk. Instead, this thing is riddled with active sunspots. These things are monsters. I mean, Jupiter-sized, many, many times the size of Earth.
Oh, yeah. They are monsters, and they are, incidentally, earlier in the show, you're talking about people talking about how the sun's color has changed.
Yes.
Well, what they're seeing is the sun through the aerosol of smoke from the West Coast. Most of those people are going to be west of the Rockies.
Yeah.
And it's giving it a different hue because of the smoke, and that's up around, so a lot of it's around 35 and 40,000 feet in a thin layer.
Yeah, well, there was so much smoke here, Whitley, that I couldn't see to the end of my driveway. And what I could see of the sun later in the day was so clear with the smoke that I could look directly at the sunspots.
Well, that's amazing. It's dangerous, even with... be careful.
Well, it's like dark filtered glasses. Of course, yeah, people should never do that. I'm stupid, but there it is, and so I looked.
Yeah.
And
you can see them easily with your naked eye.
Oh yes, yes.
But folks, do heed Art's warning, and if you're going to look for them, go to a site like spaceweather.com and read up on how to safely look at the sun first, because it can burn your retina in seconds.
Well, the best way to do it is go to spaceweather.com. They've got superb pictures, better than you'll see anyway. But, everybody wants to look with their own eye. We just had enough smoke to make that possible. It was pretty wicked here for a while from the fires.
Oh, man. Down here in L.A., where I'm living at the moment, it's been like, we came out here a few weeks ago, and it was like the beginning of the apocalypse, because first we arrived here, and the whole place went on strike. And then then there was a week of unbelievable record-high temperatures. And the Santa Anas were not gusty; they were just very intense, blowing very intensely.
Yes.
And then we had the fires break out. And
yes.
God, what's interesting? They have identified 4 of the fire sources as being arson.
Uh-huh.
One of them is being a mistake.
I think it's a lot more than 4, but identified as, yeah.
If it isn't arson, and it isn't something else like that, then what did start them? Because, there's something odd about the fact that all of these fires started over this entire area all at the same time. I must say that I read my own website's news. I do not write it, I might add, but I read it every day.
Uh-huh.
And a few days ago, they had a story up there to the effect that Al-Qaeda had been claiming that they were going to set fires in the western United States in June. Making the claim in June. The FBI had sent out a warning to all fire service departments all over the western United States. But the warning memo says at the bottom that we have no confirmation as to whether or not this is true. So they didn't do anything. They didn't increase their vigilance in any way at all. And
no, I'd not heard that.
Yeah, well, that's typical of what happens. But my question is this. I'm not so sure that these fires are necessarily all set. There may be another geologic factor involved here that we don't yet know about that's causing this. It certainly wasn't lightning.
No, it definitely was not lightning. Occasionally, of course, electric lines falling will do it, but these were horrible. I've never in my life seen anything of this magnitude. God, it was unbelievable. All the channels out west, folks, were covering it in Southern California just about full time.
Full time. Every single channel was covering it full time.
Yeah.
It was an unbelievable event. And, of course...
By the way, you're in Los Angeles helping out or doing something for the science fiction channel.
Yes, I am. I am working on a 6-hour miniseries based on my 2 most recent vampire novels, Last Vampire and Lilith's Dream. and I am presently writing this.
Have you? Well, then I've got a good question for you, Whitley. It's off base here, but have you done a lot of investigation into vampires? I mean,
a lot. A great deal.
Real vampires. I interviewed a vampire a couple of weeks ago. A really strange, exceptionally intelligent man who claims he's a vampire. And so how much, I mean, what kind of research do you do when you write these kinds of books?
Well, my interest in vampires, I think, comes out of my close encounter experiences. I have, however, done, and I'll get into that in a minute, I have done a lot of research into vampires. One of the most interesting stories I came across was in a book called Piercing the Darkness by a lady named Catherine Ramsland, as I recall. Mm-hmm. She wrote the book because she had been following the career of a Village Voice reporter who had been on the trail of, she thought, real vampires. And the reporter disappeared. Disappeared. And Ramsland set out to try to find her.
May I ask you a couple of questions?
Sure.
When you say vampires, do you mean blood-sucking, eternal living vampires in every sense that we understand them in the media, the popular media depiction of the vampire? They live forever, they take people's blood, like that?
Let me answer this kind of indirectly.
Okay.
We will not be able to understand a predator that preys on mankind any better than a gazelle can understand a pack of lions. The lions make the gazelle nervous.
Yes.
But he basically never figures it out.
No.
And that's exactly the place we would be in. We would kind of smell them like we do right now. We sort of smell something funny in the air, but we don't do what we probably ought to do.
Run?
Like hell, because they're smarter than we are, because they're the predators and they have the drop on us.
Oh.
That's how I would answer that question. There was a time when I would confidently say, no, I don't think that's real, but no more. I've been through too much. I've been so far out beyond the edge. I don't think so. I would not say it's impossible.
So we're like the gazelle, then, that sort of maybe just before getting struck sniffs the air and says, huh? And then it's all over.
Something's funny.
Yeah, something's funny. Oops.
Right.
And that's it. Well, so you really think they might exist? And I say the blood-taking, eternal living type of vampire, that kind of vampire.
Well, I've written 3 books about them now, and I find it very, very interesting and satisfying. I'm really loving working on this miniseries for the same reason.
You and Anne Rice, huh?
Yeah, they mean a lot to me.
Why?
They mean a lot to me.
Why?
Well, I think that there is something very predatory about the close encounter experience.
Oh.
Not necessarily an all bad experience, but it's very predatory quality to it. And I think that my first 2 novels that I wrote, The Wolfen, these brilliant gray creatures that kind of travel in packs and are smarter than human beings, and it's really a description of the Greys.
It's obvious that you're fascinated with the whole subject.
And the vampires, my vampires, are the blondes.
Predators and prey. All right, Whitley, hold on. And ladies and gentlemen, Whitley Strieber. Whitley, welcome back.
Glad to be here.
All right. Tempting as it is, maybe we'll launch back into the subject of vampires when we take some calls later. That would be fun. But there's so much to cover. Now, I stumbled on, I visit your website regularly. You're a source of material for me. So I went onto your website, and I started getting all these emails from people that said, my God, Whitley's discovered something about his early abduction that he had forgotten, or found something, or, and it just went into all kinds of detail about it. And so apparently something's happened to you, huh?
Yeah, well, let me tell you the story. First, I'm going to start in a way with the bottom line. It's this. Since it happened, and I made the decision to write a book about it and to therefore go public with it, a decision I subsequently regretted, and now I don't regret it anymore. I'm going to tell you why in a minute. I always said, as I say in the book, that maybe it wasn't real. Maybe it was my mind. Maybe it was something else that we don't understand. I have closed that question. It was a real physical experience, and in my strong opinion, was not done by human beings.
All right, and that's a pretty radical conclusion to come to. It is
a radical change.
So how?
Now, here's what began the process of this change. It didn't begin with me. It didn't begin with my experience. It began, rather, in British Columbia in July. I received from a UFO investigator. Incidentally, folks, or you may not know this, but there is a massive UFO wave going on in the world right now.
I am to some degree aware of it. I mean, yes.
It used to be back in the 70s when there was a big wave, and in the 50s when there was another big wave. This is as big as both of those put together.
That's big.
Big. It's very big.
Why? What's gone? Well,
it's the Mars
sorry,
effect.
I shouldn't ask you that, should I?
It's the Mars effect. Mars came very close to us. I predicted last October on my website that I wrote a journal entry called The Year of the Alien. And to get these journals, you click on Mindframe on the top of my website and you'll see them. Anyway, 2003 be the year of the alien. And the reason I wrote that was very simple. Mars, as you well know, came extremely close to Earth, and there is one consistent cycle in the UFO phenomenon, and that is when Mars is closest to Earth, UFO activity rises. And we had this very, very close Mars opposition and a great deal of UFO activity. At the height of the Mars opposition, there occurred probably the single best documented close encounter experience in history.
Oh, can you relate that?
No, I can't do that. Yes, of course I can. I'm not holding anything back, by the way. Not tonight.
Wait a minute. Why not?
I can. Of course I can. I'm telling you I can.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Yeah, I can.
I thought you were saying I can't. I was going to say, who got to you?
I scared you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No. Nobody got to me, and I'll tell you every detail that I know.
Okay.
Situation. Two ladies they've gotten together for the first time in a number of years. And it's way up in British Columbia. And they decide they'll go sky watching about midnight, around midnight one night. And one of them says, it's kind of funny. They used to do a lot of stargazing up there because, of course, it's like it is out where you are. It's wonderful sky at night.
So they were not looking for aliens.
They weren't even thinking about it.
They were just going out, yes, we have beautiful skies here, and, of course, in British Columbia as well. When it's clear, it's awesome.
Yeah, and so they're going to go out and take a look at the sky.
Okay.
And they're out there looking at the sky, and they suddenly notice something. 3 stars in a triangular formation seem to be moving. Now, the second I heard the Brian Viking tell me this, I knew who it was and what would soon happen to these ladies. See, I could have told him the story he was about to tell me from all the years of being fed information by other folks who've had this happen to them. And the ladies were very amazed by this sight of these stars. And they were out of the car. They got out of the car to look more closely. And they were out of the car, and the driver immediately turned a flashlight on to scan the roadside because, this is way up in British Columbia.
Right.
You don't get out of a car at night without being sure there are no bears or anything around because it's a much wilder part of the world than down south of here in the most parts of the United States. And she was appalled to see these bright fluorescent green slanted eyes in the brush just a few feet away.
Oh.
And, and they didn't look like any animal she'd ever seen before. She didn't know what in the world they were. They were not far away. They were quite close. And they both saw them, and immediately she said, "My God, we've got to get back in the car. Get back in the car." And they couldn't move right. But they seemed, they struggled. They worked. They got back in the car, and they drove home. And when they got home, they discovered that they had made a note. She had happened to notice the time as they were getting out of the car. It was like 12:10. Mm-hmm. And it was like 30 or 40 minutes had passed without any explanation whatsoever as to what happened during that time.
Huh.
They had, on the way home, this immense light over the car. Mm-hmm. They got home, and then they had a very difficult, troubled sleep that night.
They had been abducted.
They had been abducted. Yeah. And here's what happened the next morning. The friend comes in and says, "I'm in a lot of pain." And she had something that looked to them like a burn above her coccyx, a significant burn. And there was no explanation whatsoever in their lives for this. Mm-hmm. She went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "It's a very strange burn. It looks like to me like you would get as a radiation burn." It would not heal. It would not heal. It finally healed up to a degree. Then it started in again. Then it finally and did completely heal by the end of September.
Meanwhile, I mean, how did they report this? I mean, when something like this happens,
they had Brian Vicke is up there, and they reported it, I believe, directly to him. Because he's in the newspapers up there as the person to call if you have a UFO experience.
Right.
And so he gets this report. And what he then knows is that there were people in the area who also, at the same time that these women were having this experience, saw these UFOs in the area, in the same location.
More witnesses for the same incident.
It becomes the best witnessed abduction case with physical traces left on the people who had this happen to them.
And when did this happen?
In July.
In July.
In late July, yeah.
Late July.
And it is I'm trying to think if I'm going to look on my site and see if the interview with her is still available.
Well,
but anyway.
Did she undergo hypnosis? No, huh?
No, they don't have any memories, and I don't know that there's any plan for them to undergo hypnosis. They may. It's only available for site subscribers at this point. The Dreamland stays up for 4 weeks, and then it becomes available for subscribers. I think.
Well, why aren't you a subscriber?
To Dreamland, to my website?
Yes.
Well, if you want to, please do. I mean, I can't say
no. I meant you.
I am.
You are, but you can't get in there right now.
Well, I could, but I don't need to. I already know what the interview says.
All right.
Anyway, this is a very, very strong case because it's indistinguishable from a real event because it was a real event.
Because it was a real event,
Of course it was.
All right. Well, since you are yourself an abductee.
Now, what happened in my case is let me tell you.
Yes, please.
Right after I had my abduction, actually it was in March. The abduction occurred in late December. In March, I went to the doctor. I'd gone to quite a few doctors by that point, but I ended up in the hands of Dr. Donald Klein, mm-hmm. who was the chief, I believe, of the New York State Department of Psychiatry and a specialist in forensic hypnosis.
Okay.
And he hypnotized me twice. In those hypnosis sessions, the second one was the transcription was in my book Communion. And this was the source of all of what for me was very embarrassing mirth and jokes. I mean, on every conceivable, even it was even on the Simpsons, I believe, there were these rectal probe jokes and stuff.
Yeah, and it all came from that.
It all came from that. Now,
I know you also had a pretty rough time, wasn't it, with Larry King?
Yeah, he laughed in my face.
He laughed at, yeah.
Because I was always fascinated by this, because I thought to myself, what would these super politically correct people, all far left politically correct types, think? They would never dare to laugh at a woman who was a rape victim.
Of course not.
But a man comes who's a rape victim, and they can reveal their real inner hardness.
That says, well, it says something about our society.
Yeah, it does. And it's testosterone-soaked, uneasy guys, very uneasy with their own sexuality.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's that. And I think I never listened to that again. In fact, I did listen to it once, and that was to erase from the tapes that I had, except for the master tape, all traces of that part of it, because I found the whole thing so embarrassing. I was going on literally show after show after show, even recently, about a year ago, on Politically Incorrect, and all they did was tell rectal probe jokes.
Yeah, you've got to remember, folks, this was all revealed during hypnosis sessions. And that's how it all
happened.
Came out. So he took the dangerous road of telling the truth about what happened.
And paid the price. But all of these years, I was always saying it could have been part of, in my mind, you have to keep an open mind. You don't know for sure. Then, interestingly enough, I thought to myself, I would like to put the two hypnosis tapes up on my website for my subscribers.
By the way, South Park even did it.
South Park, yeah. Right. It's so many places you just can't count them. So I couldn't find the original of the second hypnosis tape. And I just couldn't find it and couldn't find it and couldn't find it. I looked everywhere for it. And I was very sad because I thought, well, I can't ever, I've lost everything. I've lost this thing, and I should never have erased those others.
Sure.
One morning, I opened my bedside table, which I open every day, and there it was, lying in the drawer.
Plain sight?
Plain sight.
Uh-huh.
I've been opening that drawer every day for years, and it wasn't ever there before. Never. There it was, and with it was a tape I had, I believe, thrown out. I used to listen to audio tapes of music that at night, to go to sleep.
Sure.
And this was the tape I had listened to that night before the abduction. And I tried listening to it again, and it was like a nightmare. It was, a lot of old, sort of quiet late-night songs. And I thought, I'll never listen to any of these songs again. I threw it out. And there it was, lying beside the hypnosis tape in my drawer.
Huh. So any thoughts on how that happened?
I have no idea, Art. I can't even begin to explain it. I can't even begin to explain it. I'll tell you another incident in a few minutes, though, that's connected in a way. Anyway, I listened to the second hypnosis tape, and you're talking about synchronicities. At the same time this happened, I got an email from somebody, just a listener, a reader of my website, maybe, who said to me that he thought he knew what had happened to me that night. And he talked about a certain type of device which is used for people who are sexually dysfunctional, this pre-Viagra thing, I guess.
Yes.
Which is inserted into the rectum, and a electric current is sent up into the muscles around the prostate, and it causes an erection and ejaculation.
Uh-huh.
Now, listening to this audio tape for the first time since early 1987, I was appalled to realize what it describes.
Well, it's genetic.
Here is this man, but listen to this man, me, talking. He's saying this thing is being put into me, and I have an erection. Where did that come from?
That's on the tape?
That's all on the tape.
Oh.
Seeing this, realizing it, having no reason to expect it, because in my life, an erection is always associated with sexual excitement. It's not automatic.
Right.
And it was that night. Now, until a month ago, when I got this letter from this guy, I had no idea that this type of process, that a device could be inserted into a human being's body, an electrical current turned on, and it would cause an erection and an ejaculation. But that is what is described on that tape from 1985, and I think that could only be true if it was a real event. It cannot be that I made that up.
No, you couldn't have dreamed that one up.
You couldn't have. So it had to have physically happened. They took semen, and they take eggs, and they take semen. They do this routinely. I have got thousands of letters about this from people all over the world. Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs have been studying this for years. John Mack. This is what happens. It happened to me. This is real. It is not in our heads. It is not some kind of temporal lobe epilepsy. It is not an imaginal experience or imaginary.
Oh, yes.
It is certainly no lie. It is real. Now, that's where I am right now.
Were you, when you heard this, were you surprised? I mean, obviously,
when I put this all together?
At some point in the past, you had heard these tapes previously, years ago.
Years ago, but I didn't know anything about this device at all. I didn't know if such a thing could exist. And yet it does exist, and it's a device that is used. It's used in animal husbandry and in cases where people have, in fertility clinics.
Then there are some potential Whitleys somewhere, here or there.
Art, that has haunted me since I realized this. It has haunted me. Yes, there are, potentially. And where are they? Where are they? What kind of lives did they live? Or are they living?
Well, as you're well aware in abduction research, there are a number of cases, Whitley, where women have been introduced to the children that were the result of abductions after those children were actually born. I don't know of any men who have been given that opportunity, but one never knows.
I do. There was a fellow named Jesse Long who had that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And if you go on the Internet and look up the word electroejaculation,
you'll get returns.
You'll get returns. Center for Male Reproduction.
And that's in the abduction hypnosis tape that you wow.
An exact description of that process is in that tape, made all those years ago by a man who had no idea what it was.
Whitley, there's some things that I'm wondering. For example, when you get to hear, suddenly you get to hear a tape like that that's been gone for so many years. I wonder, does it jog parts of your brain? Does that whole experience come back in little flashes and pieces and parts? And does something like that help, or what?
Art, it has been vivid in my mind since the day it happened. It's still, right after it happened, the morning after it happened, I was extremely confused and disturbed and beat up.
Yeah.
Beat up. It wasn't, there were physical effects. I could barely sit down. I had a big mark on the side of my head. I was achy. I really had been through the ringer.
Yeah, you were in shock, actually.
And I was in shock, and I knew something had gone wrong during the night. And it was a terribly eerie feeling, because it wasn't like I'd fallen out of bed or anything. It was really a sense of there having been people around or something dreadfully wrong. I was terribly scared. I'd been scared all fall. because this had been happening all fall. It had happened 3 or 4 times, apparently, during the course of the fall. And I was so scared. My marriage was breaking up because I had thought I was going psychotic. I was really going through the ringer.
Yeah, I know you've been through some rough times.
Rough times. Yeah. And the memory of it, mainly of that face that's on the cover of Communion, is still just incredibly vivid in my mind. And it has never changed. Hearing my voice talking on the tape after all of these years,
yeah,
I thought I was more distant from it. It was like a little bit like listening to another person. I thought, that poor jerk.
Yeah.
What happened to him? You know, and yet it was me. And, but you know, I have to tell you that given that this is happening, and you know, we are dancing around like crazy, people will write me emails saying, oh, it was the military, or it was this, or it was that, or it was the other thing. Anything except it was aliens who are more in control of the situation than we are or will ever be, and they are here, and they are doing things to us, and they are hiding. You don't hide if you want to do something to somebody that they're going to like.
Yeah.
You don't hide.
I've been almost a follower of David Jacobs and what he thinks about them for a long time now. Everybody thinks warm and fuzzy. I don't know what their motives are, and I don't know what they're all about, but what they're doing doesn't seem very friendly at all. And that's what an awful lot of people think, Whitley. It's joy time, welcome down, get on top of the building, flashlights, come on down, fix everything for us. I don't know, Whitley. I'm not in that group.
Well, I have thought to myself, what might they be doing?
Yeah.
And the real truth is, it may be a question that's unanswerable to us. Unanswerable because they may be so far in advance of us that what they're doing is incomprehensible. But I will tell you 2 things I know they're doing. They are raping, and they are stealing. Mm-hmm. Those are 2 things they are definitely doing. I made something wonderful out of my close encounter experience. But what I made out of it was mine. It was mine. I really, after that, went into, last night on Ghost to Ghost, you were speculating as to whether or not there's a soul. I have lived, I have walked in that world, and there is. Believe me. I've done things that no one, I don't think, has ever really reported doing before. I had a relationship with someone from that level of reality, a ghost, if you will, that was very organized and coherent and lasted for months. And it wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for the close encounter experience, because the close encounter experience shattered my reality. It cracked my cosmic egg, and I was able to see out into a bigger world in which we live. We are living in a little corner of a great, big, incredible world, and it gave me that. The experience gave me that, and if I have to say thank you to them for that, fine. But I would also appreciate it if they had asked me for what they took from my body. Yeah. And I say that on behalf not only of me, but all of the other abductees. And where are those children?
My guest tomorrow night, just sliding back a little bit to the soul thing, tomorrow night John Lear's here.
Yeah.
John Lear hasn't been interviewed in many years, Whitley. One of the things that he told me that so profoundly affected me maybe 10 years ago when he said it was that this is all about our souls. He said that. He said we are nothing but vessels that carry our soul, and the whole thing is about our souls. And I've never forgotten that. I'll try to get him to explain it tomorrow night. But, yes, I I lean heavily toward the fact that we have them and there is more, but that these are some prized commodities, these souls of ours.
I wonder what it would take to cross the universe or to come as far as they have come. And why, when you came, well, of course, if we went to another planet, the first thing we would want would be genetic material. We would want their DNA. We would want their sexual issue.
Yes.
We might even want to create versions and copies of them in laboratory settings of our own to study them.
Oh, well, that may be. That's as good a stab at it as any. And, of course, many other people feel that they have some sort of genetic problem that they're trying to solve through us. I don't know. You can throw an awful lot of theories at what's happening or things that might fit with what they're doing, but it all seems genetic and reproductive in.
It very much. It's very intimate and very reproductive oriented. I have to tell you, by the way, that they didn't seem to have any genetic problems to me. They were very vital and alive. They weren't sick or anything.
Well, you can leap to all kinds of conclusions that, for example, they know so much about genetics that they are our creators, that they could have created with us, and they're simply back observing and continuing the experiment. I don't know. The mind wobbles.
Yeah.
Possibilities.
And, we talk about the dark side of it, and I'll tell you another experience, and this happened not very long. It happened about a year after the Close Encounter. I've written about it. I think I wrote about it in my second book, Transformation, probably. I woke up just at the crack of dawn, early on a cold winter's morning, with an awareness that I needed to go down to the place where I had been meditating at night. I can't believe it. I mean, that I actually, after this happened to me, I kept going out into the woods in the night. I was so, you know what I was like? I was like a mouse fascinated by a snake. I couldn't stay away from it.
Were you searching for another experience? In other words, were you?
I'm not sure what I was searching for. I was desperate to do something that would help me contain the fear. On one level, on the other level, I've worried that I might have been leaving my family unguarded, that I might have been drawn out into the woods just to get me away from my family. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, but they were never hurt, so I'm not sure.
But you were compelled, apparently, to be doing what you were doing.
So anyway, this particular morning, I knew they were there. I was well aware of it. I could feel it. And the most incredible thing then happened. I grabbed my robe, threw it on, threw my slippers on, my big, heavy winter slippers, mm-hmm. and went out into the snow, went up a little rise, and then there was a path down through some thin woods, and beyond those woods there was a meadow. I could hear something in the meadow and see it. I could see an object in the meadow, a dark gray object, and there were figures standing in front of it, very dark figures. I could see them through the trees. There was no question at all. Hmm. It was certainly light enough to see. It was the pre-dawn. And then I heard this voice, and it sounded like it was inside my head, but it sounded very clear. It was not like a thought. It was more like if you were listening to earphones, and you had both earphones on, and it was stereo, and it
yes.
makes it sound like it's in your head.
Yes.
This voice says, when I stopped, I hesitated, and this voice says, "Come on, come on." And I was not going to go another step closer after hearing that voice. It was a tough, tough voice. And I thought to myself, if I go down to where that voice is, I'm not coming back. And I got a family to keep. I can't do that. And I turned around, and I went back to the house. And when I put my hand on the doorknob to open the door and go in the house, there were 3 cries from down in those woods that haunt me to this day. They were the most beautiful, most complex, richest sounds I have ever heard in my life. I have never heard an opera singer. I have never heard sounds like that ever since. They were incredible sounds.
No.
Oh! 3 cries like that. Oh! Oh! Unbelievably rich. I went in the house. I stood there for a minute and went back up to bed, got in the bed, and suddenly there was the feeling of a presence in the room. And the damnedest thing, I suddenly felt like there was somebody right there. It scared the living daylights out of me. And then I had a flashback to my babyhood so vivid it was like I was reliving my babyhood with the mind of an adult inside a baby's body, and I relived the moment when I first walked on 2 feet. It was stunning. Unbelievable. Arf, what is this about? What am I telling you? I don't know.
I don't know either. I'm trying to put together what you're saying right now.
Well, what I'm telling you is that David has got part of the story. But this is a very big, complicated story. It's as big as our souls, and our souls are a whole lot bigger than we dare to face. That's what I'm telling you.
Yeah, that's got some very deep meaning.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you, more than anybody's had lots of time to think about that meaning. But
I had to.
Did it produce any emotion or feeling or understanding in you that led to anything?
Overwhelming.
To go back to to be thrust back to your childhood and your first steps and all that. I mean,
because the childhood amnesia dropped away, and I ended up remembering to before I was born. I vividly remember now, since that experience, the moment I came into my mother's body. I remember it all. I remember the moment of birth. I remember the whole thing.
Well, right there. Wait, stop. Of course, I have no such memory. I can remember myself in a crib, and that's as far as it goes. I can remember that damn crib like a little jail.
That day, I had no such memory either.
But to remember when you began to exist in your mother, and to remember your time in womb and all of that, I got to stop, and I've got to ask you, what are those memories like? To remember yourself in the womb, or to remember the moment of that magic moment.
They're wonderful. They're treasures, unbelievably beautiful treasures.
Oh, wait a minute. That's clearly reproductive oriented.
Yes.
Seriously so, right?
Yes. And what does it have to do with what they did to me?
Well, maybe that gets a little closer, actually.
Yeah. Maybe it does.
Maybe it is related, actually.
Of course it's related. It's all related. What I'm talking about is a relationship with a mind that is very powerful, that is very different from us, but that is incredibly, intimately involved in us, a la what John said to you, this is about the human soul.
Yeah.
I'm talking about soul stuff now. Memories that are soul memories that got somehow washed up on the shore of my ordinary life because of this experience.
Maybe they wanted you to just understand the beginning of life, and because that was going to be part of the process that...
Why me?
Why me?
I'm just an ordinary
I think
guy.
That's what everybody who has... I bet those 2 ladies up in British Columbia are probably saying, why us?
I have heard Cynthia say, why me?
See, there you are.
Yeah.
Of course. And I guess you've thought about that one hard, too. Is there anything about you that is enough out of the ordinary when you really seriously consider it, so you would be a candidate for this kind of thing?
Well, yeah, there are a number of things that happened. I think that this stuff runs in families.
I've heard.
And my uncle was involved in the Roswell incident, and I have a feeling that maybe that's why I was picked, because they were already aware of him or something. I don't know.
Well, you're right about it running in families, and once again, that's nothing but a genetic trail they're following. It's a genetic trail. When you talk about families, you're talking about a genetic trail, right?
It's very true. Like a hound that can smell out genes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a genetic trail, and so everything keeps coming back to that, and just wonder what it could mean. Well, so on this tape that you've recovered, that was certainly one shocking fact, but I mean,
yeah.
Was there more, it must have been so weird to listen to that after so many years.
It was shocking. I was standing. It hit me just between the eyes, because here's the weirdest part of it. Why would I get the letter from this man? The only letter about this I have ever received in my life, about this process of electroejaculation.
Mm-hmm.
A day or two before the tape appears in my drawer, and then I listen to it. This isn't an accident. It didn't just fall together. There's an invisible presence there doing that.
All for a reason, Whit.